Tonight, up front, something that's hard to believe, but unfortunately true. With all the problems we face in this country, with figuring out what to do with our own nuclear waste material, we have an added burden, a burden we bear for some valid reasons. But would you believe we are importing the nuclear garbage of other countries for storage here? A dangerous storage problem that scientists haven't yet been able to solve. Well, Geraldo Rivera trailed some of the nuclear waste from Europe right to this country in this special report.
This strange mushroom-shaped cask being removed from the hull of a ship contains more than 175 pounds of highly radioactive atomic waste. It's our latest import from Europe, and it's heading for South Carolina to be buried. Barnwell, South Carolina is fast becoming the nuclear garbage dump for the free world, and it all began just 34 years ago. After the terrible power of the atom was demonstrated at Hiroshima and at Nagasaki, a massive effort began in the United States to direct nuclear power to peaceful uses. Walt Disney produced an educational film classic called Our Friend the Atom, in which atomic energy was portrayed as a fierce and gigantic genie, capable of being capped and stored by the clever little fisherman, representing man. In 1953, President Eisenhower went to the United Nations with a program. He called it Atoms for Peace.
In support of President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace plan, Argonne National Laboratory near Chicago opens a school of nuclear science and engineering. Argentina, Australia, Mexico, Belgium, Brazil, Egypt, France, Greece, and Guatemala are among 19 countries represented.
The Disney film and the Eisenhower program were all part of a gigantic effort by industry and government to sell the world on the virtues of a new technology. Nuclear technology.
Under the plan, the United States, in the spirit of partnership that moves us, will contribute half the cost. We will also furnish the acquiring nation the nuclear material needed to fuel the reactor.
During the nuclear boom, the industry went international, and the United States became the world's major promoter and exporter of nuclear power technology. Atoms for Peace has so far resulted in 106 commercial and research reactors built with U.S. money, know-how, and uranium. As this film produced by the Atomic Energy Commission shows, as late as 1971, we were proud we had introduced the rest of the world to Our Friend the Atom.
Almost everywhere you look, nuclear power is coming of age. Japan, Italy, France, Spain, India. The reasons? Many. For one thing, they are safe.
For years, it was widely believed that the plutonium and other unburned nuclear byproducts produced by those reactors overseas were unsuitable for use in nuclear weapons. So since the waste couldn't be made into atomic bombs, the export of nuclear technology wasn't increasing the risk of world catastrophe. Not much. 5 years ago, India exploded an atomic bomb using spent fuel from one of its civilian reactors. Suddenly, the dream of Atoms for Peace exploded in a cloud of radioactive dust. Jacob Scheer is the staff attorney for the Natural Resources Defense Council.
Since 1976, we have urged the State Department to remove all U.S. supplied spent fuel from India. There are now 60 tons of U.S. supplied spent fuel sitting at a reactor near Bombay. This spent fuel contains enough plutonium for several hundred atomic weapons. We feel that it would be much better to remove that material and bring it back to the United States today so that the Indians tomorrow, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, will not be in a position to take that material and manufacture more nuclear weapons.
The average commercial reactor exported by the United States produces about 500 pounds of plutonium a year. With the technical know-how, that's enough to manufacture 50 atomic bombs. At least 6 countries already have the know-how, and the following 21 countries could have the bomb within the next 5 years. Faced with the harsh fact that the technology used to create this might lead eventually to this, the United States feels it has little choice. To prevent nuclear proliferation, we've had to begin importing the nuclear waste from foreign countries. This is the research reactor at Saclay in France. This reactor complex produces enough nuclear waste to build 10 bombs the size of the one dropped on Hiroshima. As a result, the spent nuclear fuel temporarily stored in this pool will eventually be removed for shipment to the United States. France isn't the only nation shipping highly radioactive waste to the United States. West Germany, Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, and this nuclear facility here in Belgium will all be adding to a grand total of almost 2,000 pounds of highly radioactive nuclear waste being shipped back to the United States this year alone. The Atlantic container line carries most of the nuclear waste from Europe to the United States. Last month we taped one of the vessels entering the harbor at Antwerp, Belgium. Once docked, an 8-foot-high fuel cask was removed from the hull of the ship. The empty cask was then transported by road about 25 miles to the BR2 reactor in the town of Maal, Belgium. The cask that landed at Antwerp was filled with 175 pounds of spent nuclear fuel, and it was shipped aboard the Atlantic Causeway. On Thursday, July 12th, the Causeway sailed into Portsmouth, Virginia. At the dock, a Coast Guard team went aboard to check the cask for radiation leaks. Finding none, it was then removed under armed guard to begin a trip by truck through Virginia and North Carolina to here, the Savannah River plant in Barnwell, South Carolina. This is where the United States produced the materials for its atomic weapons. The facility is enormous, 300 square miles containing 5 nuclear reactors and about 50 tanks for the storage of nuclear waste. 11 days after it sailed from Belgium and 1 day after it was landed in Portsmouth, Virginia, the cask containing about 175 pounds of spent nuclear fuel has arrived safely here in South Carolina. The contents of that cask will now be reprocessed. Because the spent fuel is so deadly, it has to be unloaded underwater in a special pool. The elements are then removed one by one and dropped into a special storage rod, which shows that the fuel came from the BR2 reactor in Belgium. From here, the waste will end up either as reprocessed fuel or as nuclear waste, to be added to our own ever-growing stockpile of nuclear waste that nobody really knows how to get rid of. Richard Pollack is the director of Ralph Nader's Critical Mass Energy Project.
If governments can build recklessly nuclear reactors throughout their country without any notion that they will have to take responsibility for the radioactive waste that's being generated, that breeds a sense of irresponsibility. There is no accountability here whatsoever. If they know they can ship this stuff to New Jersey or to Washington State or to South Carolina and their own citizens will not be faced with the risks of contamination or of other problems regarding spillage, then they will continue recklessly to build these reactors.
For now, at least, the waste is being kept in these gigantic storage tanks at Savannah River. But this is just temporary storage. It takes 24,000 years for plutonium waste to become harmless. Unfortunately, the tanks don't last nearly that long. At a cost of about $200 million, 18 new storage tanks are being built to house the nuclear waste that's generated by reactors both here and overseas. One of the reasons for this large new construction project is that cracks were discovered in 9 of the older storage tanks. Before some of the tanks were even 20 years old, they'd begun to crack. Tank number 14, for instance, was taken out of service recently after high-level nuclear waste began to seep through cracks in the inner wall. The liquid crystallized into a kind of white salt. Alert technicians spotted the leak before it had escaped into the environment. Becky Hardy is a resident of South Carolina and an anti-nuclear activist.
You know, South Carolina is already the United States dumping ground for nuclear waste. And now, to understand that foreign waste is also being stored there is a travesty.
Whether the nuclear waste comes from the United States or from overseas, somebody obviously is going to have to be around to keep an eye on it for a long, long time. In the case of plutonium, it will be at least 24,000 years. That's 240 centuries before we're able to call even half of it our friend, the atom.
How much of the waste that's accumulating comes in from overseas?
The estimates I've seen amount to about 30 million pounds coming from overseas. Now, of course, you have to add that to the nuclear waste generated right here in the United States, about 10 times that much, and it just doesn't go away.
Thank you, Geraldo.